Let's head into this newscast with the latest coming in on Iran and the United States. As days after US airstrikes killed Iranian Commander Qasem Soleimani, the slain general has finally been laid to rest in his hometown of Kerman. Thousands have gathered at the mosque in General's hometown, Kerman, to pay homage to the late commander. The funeral ceremony has reached its final stage, as you can see, and Qasem Soleimani has now been buried. This after the ceremony was postponed from yesterday following mass stampede that killed nearly 60 and injured about 190 people. For some more details and perspective, let's quickly go across to a senior journalist from the US who's joining us on this live broadcast. I'm joined in by Mr. Ray Locker. Mr. Locker, thank you so much for sparing us your precious time. Mr. Locker, I'd like to begin by asking that today what we've seen happen in Iraq, the sort of retaliation that has come in from Iran, do you think that this is just the beginning of retaliatory measures coming in from Iran?
Well, I think not, actually. What I found encouraging were the reports that there were no U.S. casualties, that the U.S. radar at both the bases picked up the missiles as they were coming in, so people got out of the way. And I have to believe that the Iranian military knew about the radar capabilities at those bases and that the chance, and they did things to kind of minimize casualties. They wanted to send a message. I think that message has been sent. And now it's up to both sides to look and see if it's in their interest to escalate the confrontation any further.
All right. Do you think that Iran can actually afford to escalate the situation any further, also compare the military might of the two countries?
Well, I mean, if it ever got to be a land war against Iran, I don't think the United States would do very well. After all, we're still in Afghanistan 18 years after we started there. We've been in Iraq since 2003. So, the track record of the United States doing well in a land war in Asia is not very good. But we can inflict a lot of damage on Iran, via airstrikes, whereas Iran has a very limited capability of reaching U.S. soil. So that would be damaging for the Iranians more so than for the United States. But if it escalated beyond that to any kind of ground confrontation, I think the United States would be looking at another quagmire on the scale of Vietnam, Afghanistan, or Iraq.
All right. Let's also look at the two targets that we're talking about right now. We're looking at Al-Assad airbase and also Irbil. How do you view the strategic importance of these two targets?
Well, the U.S. flies a lot of missions out of there. We have troops stationed at both places. It's certainly not as big as, Balad or some of the other larger bases that the United States has had there, but it's significant. Anytime a U.S. military installation is attacked, it's a big deal.
All right, but Mr. Locker, also it's important to talk about this response that has come in from Iran at the moment. It's very unlike their responses in the past, because this is a country we're looking at which is known for making veiled attacks through proxy wars. How do you view the retaliation at the moment? Is this a sort of departure from their conventional methods?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's a specific government action. It was announced by the Iranian government. It was done by the Iranian military. They said they would do something in response, and they have. They didn't farm it out to proxies like the militias they support in Iraq. They did it themselves. And I think that was on purpose, to say, as a government, we're acting in this way because you acted as your government and killed one of our generals. So I think it's different. I think actually it's promising that they did it that way. I think it opens the way for a chance to de-escalate the conflict.
It's interesting that you mentioned that it opens a chance to de-escalate the conflict. Having said that, the damage assessment is still being done. Do you think that the American response will now depend on once the damage assessment is done?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it would be foolhardy for anybody to, calculate a response before they know what kind of damage has been done to, their assets, and for them to figure out, what do they have left to do and how should they deal with it. I have to believe that there were people in the U.S. military who anticipated this and that this has been factored into the possible U.S. response. But, we have an unpredictable president at times, and it's not always easy to see, what's going to happen next.
All right. How do you view Iraq in this entire quagmire of sorts? Do you even anticipate a response at the moment?
Well, the Iraqi parliament voted to have the U.S. troops leave, and there was kind of a comedy of errors in terms of the United States seemed to say, okay, we're going to leave, and then changed its mind. I think Iraq is, once again, collateral damage in a dispute between two larger powers. I mean, so all of this is happening on their turf, not Iranian turf, and I think, they're going to be stuck in the middle for a long time.
And how do you view Washington's position at the moment, since there's been a very prominent discord when it comes to what the stance Pentagon is towing vis-a-vis the American President Donald Trump, and since you also mentioned an unpredictable precedent?
Well, I think the people.
All right, Mr. Locker, we'll just have to hold on to that question. We'll just have to hold on to that question.
Okay.
As we speak, there's a tweet coming in from Javad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran. He's tweeted out saying that Iran took and concluded proportionate measures in self-defense under Article 51 of UN Charter, targeting base from which cowardly armed attack against our citizens and senior officials were launched. We do not seek escalation or war, but will defend ourselves against any aggression. So clearly we have Javad Zarif's tweet coming in out there. Mr. Locker, you just heard me read out what he had to say. We do not seek escalation or war, but will defend ourselves against any aggression. That actually goes on to reiterate what you just said, that this could be a sort of move that might de-escalate the situation. How do you view this? Because this certainly comes across as a defensive measure on the part of Iran.
I think it's encouraging. I mean, they did this. They're saying they're going to stop. I don't really believe them. I think they'll act in some other way through proxies later, because that's been their, habit. But at least in terms of a tit-for-tat retaliation and leading to another retaliation, I think it's positive. And if this is, the only thing that happens and things cease now, the United States will have gotten off easily after killing such a major Iranian military asset like General Soleimani. So it opens the door for people to kind of calm down and say, we're not going to do this anymore. And we'll have to see, when the sun comes up tomorrow, how the U.S. government will react.
Absolutely, how the U.S. government will react and should be reacting, and what role should allies be playing at the moment, because this, as we can see, has been an escalated conflict which has clearly divided the world into two fronts. How do you see the allies panning out?
Well, look, Iran is a major oil exporting nation, so is Iraq. Further conflict in that area damages the global economy, and particularly those of the U.S. allies. So they're going to do what they can to limit the spread of this, and, all of that makes sense. Nobody in their right mind wants to see the United States and Iran engaging in a major military confrontation, in a part of the world where so much energy comes from. Everybody knows that this would just be a catastrophe if it got much worse than it is now. And so I expect the allies to do everything they can to stop it.
All right. To end with, my last question, Mr. Locker, is going to be, do you see any bleak possibility of a renegotiation as far as the 2015 nuclear deal is concerned? Do you see Iran coming to terms with the deal at all?
No, I don't. For them to do that would be to acknowledge that the pressure campaign that the Trump administration has placed on them, had worked. I think they don't believe that they want to give into that, and I don't think the rest of the world or the allies have given them any reason to think that that would be a good thing for them to do. So I don't think that this is going to push Iran to the table to renegotiate a nuclear deal that would put them at a significant disadvantage. I think there may be a chance that they won't restart their nuclear program, but I don't think they'll enter into a nuclear deal that's any worse for them than the 2015 deal.
But that also brings us back to square one, and that makes I'd like to actually end by asking you, do you think the United States has actually opened up a Pandora's box by assassinating General Soleimani, because that has only led to the acceleration of Iran's nuclear ambitions?
Absolutely. It's opened a Pandora's box. That's the reason why previous administrations didn't kill Soleimani. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. I mean, it's been on the list of options for the Obama and Bush administrations. I mean, they think about this in military, circles all the time. Who's a threat to us? What can we do? What are our options? And for years, they decided this was not an option that they wanted to exercise. And Trump did, and now we're seeing what happens when you do that. So they definitely opened a Pandora's box, and I don't know how we close it.
All right, that's one Pandora's box, as you rightly said. They don't know how to close one. Thank you so much, Mr. Locker, for joining us on this broadcast and sharing your precious views. Now, in the latest escalation in West Asia, Iran has fired more than a dozen rockets at Iraq's Al-Assad and Irbil military base, which hosts U.S. troops. The ongoing attack comes amid escalating tensions between Tehran and Washington. According to the Pentagon, Iran launched at least a dozen ballistic missiles and targeted at least 2 Iraqi military bases hosting U.S. military personnel at Al-Assad and Irbil. Now, Iran's Revolutionary Guards have now confirmed that it fired these rockets at U.S. forces in Iraq in revenge for the killing of General Soleimani. The bases had, however, been on high alert amid fears of attacks by the Iranian regime. Iranian Revolutionary Guards have asked the U.S. to recall U.S. troops from the region, threatening to attack Israel and U.S. allies. Meanwhile, Pentagon has now said that they will take all necessary measures to protect and defend U.S. personnel, partners and allies in the region. Shortly after the strikes, the White House announced that President will probably be making an address tonight. Now, the White House has also said that President Donald Trump has been closely monitoring the situation since the attacks. That's a tweet by the press secretary of the Pentagon. We are aware of the reports of attacks on U.S. facilities in Iraq. The president has been briefed and is monitoring the situation closely and consulting with his national security team. Meanwhile, the attack has sent U.S. lawmakers into a frenzy, with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying that she's closely monitoring the situation. She said that it was time to avoid needless provocations from the Trump administrations. Meanwhile, a top advisor to Iran's supreme leader posted an image of the Iranian flag just after Iran attacked the U.S. military bases. The tweet seems to be in response to Trump's tweet of the American flag just after the killing of Qasem Soleimani. Meanwhile, oil prices have surged by 4% following the attacks. In another fallout, the U.S. civil aviation body has banned operations over the Gulf region. Rocket attack. As we've been told, several missiles hit the Iraq base housing U.S. troops. There were 9 rockets in total that actually hit these Iraq bases, and That's the tweet. That's the latest tweet that's coming in from the US president. He has finally reacted. All is well. Missiles launched from Iran at 2 military bases located in Iraq. Assessment of casualties and damage taking place now. So far, so good. We have the most powerful and well-equipped military anywhere in the world by far. I will be making a statement tomorrow morning. So we should expect a statement coming in from the US president anytime soon. That is the US president himself confirming on Twitter the attack that has happened at the 2 military bases in Iraq which housed US troops. As he's just confirmed, the assessment of damage and casualties is currently taking place. A very condescending tone coming in from the US president, where as far as he's concerned, he's also boasted about their military might. As he says, we have the most powerful and well-equipped military anywhere in the world by far. Wouldn't want to read too much into those lines, but this is going to prove to be a very pivotal point for the US-Iran tensions. Let's see how US chooses to react to the situation.